At 7:42 a.m. over the cold waters of the Baltic Sea, a Russian Ka-52 attack helicopter rose from a hidden ridge and turned sharply toward Alone. US F-16 fighter jet patrolling under NATO orders, and what happened next became one of the most tense encounters of the year. This is the story of how a low-flying helicopter challenged a fully armed American jet, and why it turned into a big mistake. The US jet was part of a routine surveillance flight, tracking Russian activity near the Suwalki Gap, a narrow stretch between Sousperlin and Lithuania that NATO calls one of the most dangerous corridors in Europe because Russian forces can reach it within minutes, and on that morning, the weather was clear, visibility good, and radar screens quiet. But at 7:43, NATO controllers saw a sudden spike, a fast-moving radar return that didn't match any flight plan, and seconds later, the F-16 pilot visually confirmed it. A Russian Ka-52 Alligator, one of Moscow's most advanced attack helicopters built for tank hunting and close air support. The Ka-52 is no small machine. It weighs nearly 11 tons, carries heavy armor, and can fire anti-tank guided missiles with a range of up to 10 kilometers. It has two coaxial rotors spinning in opposite directions, giving it extreme agility at low altitude. But even with its power, it was never designed to challenge a modern American fighter jet, and that is where Russia miscalculated. At 7:44, the Russian heli dropped to 500 feet and moved toward the U.S. jet, forcing the F-16 pilot to break formation and climb. According to NATO logs, the Ka-52 then locked its laser rangefinder onto the American jet, a move pilots call technical aggression because it signals targeting without launching a weapon. The F-16 responded instantly. The pilot armed his AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles, which are beyond visual range weapons, capable of hitting targets from more than 100 kilometers away. The U.S. fighter also activated its ALQ-131 electronic countermeasures pod, which can jam enemy sensors and break locks. As the jet gained altitude, the American pilot made radio contact with NATO command, reporting a hostile posture. At 7:45, the Ka-52 tried a risky maneuver. It rose sharply to nearly 1,000 feet, exposing itself, likely hoping to intimidate the U.S. pilot or force him to disengage. But this only made the helicopter easier to track and left it without terrain cover. In air-to-air combat, altitude matters, and the F-16 now had the upper hand. The American pilot circled above the helicopter, which is the worst position for a rotorcraft because its weapons cannot angle high enough to defend. The Ka-52 crew realized their mistake too late. At 7:46, the F-16 locked onto the helicopter with the jet's onboard radar. And once a fighter jet locks a helicopter, the fight is already over. The helicopter cannot outrun, outclimb, or outmaneuver the jet. U.S. military analysts note that a Ka-52's top speed is about 186 miles per hour, while an F-16 can exceed 1,300 miles per hour. That's a 7-to-1 speed difference. One platform is made for ground attack. The other is built for high-speed air dominance. As the lock tone beeped inside the Ka-52 cockpit, the Russian crew broke off and turned south toward Kaliningrad airspace, trying to retreat. But the F-16 stayed on its tail, maintaining a radar lock for a full 38 seconds, a message that NATO would not tolerate harassment. At 7:47, the American jet dropped to match the helicopter's altitude, closing the distance to less than 1,000 meters. The Ka-52 could do nothing. Its Vickers missiles cannot target fast-moving jets, and its 30mm cannon is effective against vehicles and infantry, not supersonic aircraft. The U.S. pilot then performed a textbook show of force. He rolled the F-16, activated wing lights, and accelerated past the Ka-52 at over 500 miles per hour. The shockwave from the jet's engines shook the helicopter and forced it into a minor bank. Russian pilots later described the moment as unexpected and destabilizing. By 7:48, the F-16 had fully established dominance. NATO command then issued the order, "Do not fire unless fired upon." The American pilot maintained distance but held the lock until the helicopter retreated beyond the 12 nautical mile line, the internationally recognized boundary of sovereign airspace. At 7:49, the Ka-52 finally crossed back into Russian-controlled territory and disappeared from radar. The incident lasted less than 7 minutes, but it sent a strong message. The U.S. jet never fired a shot. It didn't need to. The technical edge alone settled the fight. Military experts later said this encounter showed the gap between Russian intimidation tactics and U.S. combat capability. The Ka-52 is powerful on the battlefield, but in the sky against a modern American fighter, it is outmatched from the start. For NATO, the event became another reminder of the rising number of close calls in the Baltic region, where Russian units test boundaries and push reactions. For the U.S., it was proof that its pilots remain calm under pressure, even when a rival aircraft tries a reckless move. And for Russia, it exposed a simple truth. Challenging a U.S. fighter jet with a helicopter is not a show of strength. It is a mistake that ends the same way every time.